Welcome to Spectrum 2021. My name is John Freiberger, and thank you for viewing my presentation, The Show Must Go On, How Electric Coffeehouse Went Virtual in 2020. I hope you enjoy it. I've been a technical writer now in the Rochester area for about 24 years. I currently work for Linnell S2. I'm also a bass player and a guitar player. You can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and also my blog. In fact, this presentation is a shortened version of a post on my blog. Feel free to check it out if you'd like to read more. I love music. It's been a part of my life from when I sang in chorus to learning how to play guitar in high school and to performing on stage with others. It goes without saying that the COVID-19 pandemic has been especially hard to endure. It has taken loved ones from us. It has disrupted every aspect of life. Things that we used to take for granted, like going to a club to see a band play, are currently not possible, and it's not clear when we can enjoy these simple pleasures in life again. Music is a collaborative experience. We're all connected to the vibes and the grooves from the band. But what happens to music when you can no longer collaborate in person because of possibly contracting or spreading a deadly virus? Can the show go on? Yes, it can. It'll be different, but it can be done. And that's what we'll look at today in my presentation. To set the stage, we'll cover the following topics: how the pandemic affected the music industry, how musicians can collaborate online, how the Electric Coffeehouse show went virtual, and the future of music. Let's take a look at how the pandemic impacted the music industry from the perspective of the nation's biggest promoter and ticket distributor. Live Nation is an American company that promotes concerts and operates venues all across the country. Ticketmaster is also an American company that sells and distributes tickets to shows of all kinds. In 2010, it merged with Live Nation. The United States entered its shutdown in March 2020. Let's take a look at Live Nation's second quarter numbers from 2019 to 2020. As we can see, the shutdown had a huge financial impact on Live Nation's quarterly performance from these 2 years, a 98% loss year to year. In order to recoup lost revenue due to the economic recession, Ticketmaster laid off or furloughed over 2,000 U.S. employees. For the full picture, more than 18 million U.S. employees have either been laid off or furloughed since April 2020. Virtually every major headliner that had planned on touring in 2020 has canceled some or all of its dates. Sure, this affected their bottom line, but they did this out of safety for their fans, their crews, and the venue employees all across the country. They also did this for their own safety. People joke about aging rockers strutting across stages, but these older people are in the category of age that is most vulnerable to the effects of COVID-19. The risk for them was simply too high to take the stage in 2020. The behind-the-scenes operations in the music industry were equally impacted. Joe Spalding, CEO of Boston's Bach Center, makes an excellent point about the difficulty of maintaining social distancing. It's nearly impossible to maintain 6 feet of distance backstage, setting up lights and effects, prepping the dress rooms, and everything else that they need to do. The impact felt by the larger venues and concert halls has trickled down to the smaller local clubs and halls. And maybe it was more of a flood than a trickle when looking at the impact that these smaller venues have incurred. Ever-changing rules and regulations have made it difficult or nearly impossible for these smaller clubs to stay open without crowds they've closed. And with no sources of income to apply to the continuing costs of operation, like rent and utilities, some clubs have closed permanently. Those that are still shuttered are struggling to stay afloat. For example, the Bug Jar is a club in Rochester that has showcased great local and regional talent since 1991. To make ends meet, the owners started a GoFundMe account to raise over $10,000 simply to cover costs while they were closed. Other forms of music, such as community bands and choirs, equally have suffered. Naperville is a suburb west of Chicago, and it boasts 3 community groups. The Naperville Young Singers, a 430-member group ranging in age from 1st grade to 12th. The Naperville Municipal Band, an ensemble that has played through the Spanish flu pandemic and both world wars without missing a beat. And the 25-member Naperville Men's Glee Club. Each of these groups have lamented over the loss of their performing season, specifically over the loss of interacting with and delighting their audiences. Dave Mueller, the president of the Glee Club, said in an interview with the Chicago Tribune that the club has tried to rehearse using Zoom. Mueller said, "At least everyone can learn their part, but you don't hear anyone else singing. It's very limited that way, and it feels like you're singing a solo." Communities have seen their favorite venues and clubs close and ensembles cancel shows. Such venues and events help define a community's culture. Losing them tears away at that fabric. Mueller's comment about the limitations of using Zoom leads us into our next section. Music is not only good for the heart and soul, but it's an important revenue generator. And with the industry on pause, what are musicians to do? You're seeing more live stream performances, from star-studded shows like the One World Together at Home concert that raised nearly $130 million in relief for COVID, to bands and clubs streaming shows on their social media pages like Facebook and YouTube. But how easy is it to jam online? Can we just open a Zoom meeting and start playing? Not really. Let's watch the first couple minutes of the Jazz Night video from NPR on latency and playing music over the internet.
Getting a band together to play is hard enough already, but playing together on a video call, that might be harder than you think. And here's why. Every time you talk over a video call, it takes time for your voice to travel over the internet and for the people on the other end to hear you. That's called latency. We can tolerate it in conversation, but it makes playing music together almost impossible. And for jazz musicians, improvising is our lifeblood. Without other musicians to play with, there's no improvising. To play together, we have to hear each other at the exact same time, or at least perceive it that way. And it takes time for sound to travel any distance. But a study showed that in person, musicians can still play in sync up to 30 feet apart. Sound travels that 30 feet in about 30 milliseconds. Over a video call, it usually takes about 500 milliseconds or half a second. Now this is what a 30 millisecond delay sounds like. It's there, but it's hard to notice. Now this is a 500 millisecond delay. Big difference, right? With that added latency, playing in sync becomes impossible. So if video calls are too slow, is there a way for musicians in quarantine to play together?
I remember when I was a teenager, I once tried to do like a little rehearsal with a bassist over the phone, and it's just like, it's hopeless because you're getting at least half a second, often over a second of latency, and it's just terrible.
Dan told us that a few weeks ago, another musician asked him if someone in Hawaii could play with someone in New York City.
Well, nothing can travel faster than the speed of light, right? This is like a basic tenet of physics. Nothing. And it does take light some time to get from place to place. And so I got like a little piece of paper out and I wrote down New York to Hawaii is 8,000 kilometers. and light travels at 300,000 kilometers per second.
And if you do the math, it takes about 52 milliseconds for light to do New York to Hawaii round trip. And remember, for musicians to play together, they need latencies of 30 milliseconds or lower.
So at the end of the day, there is no possible way, unless literally the fundamental laws of physics change, that someone in New York could play in real time with someone in Hawaii in any kind of meaningful, like real rhythmic interaction type of way.
Okay, so it sounds like New York City to Hawaii isn't going to happen. But then,
Are there ways to work around latency? Yes. There are plenty of options out there. These options are intriguing, but they can have a steep learning curve if you're not tech savvy, as you'll need some additional equipment to connect your instruments so they can play over the computer. And you may need to make some changes to your home network. In my blog, I cover 4 options. For the sake of time today, I'm going to focus on only 2 of them. If you'd like to learn more about the other options, check out my blog. Let's start with Jack Trip, which is featured in the NPR video.
Dan tweeted about this, and somewhere in the comments there was a beacon of hope. A link to a video made by another jazz tech guru, Michael Dessin.
As a musician, I compose and perform and deal with different kinds of technologies, but one area of my research is this networked music making, and it went from being a curious novelty for people to suddenly being an urgent necessity to learn about. So my phone's been ringing off the hook.
Since the early 2000s, Michael has been using an open source software created at Stanford University called Jack Trip to rehearse and perform music remotely with other musicians.
What it does is it moves audio data specifically in a very efficient way at very high quality, meaning you can capture really high quality sound recordings and move them immediately, very quickly, across networks with the minimal travel time. One of the things we found was that up to around 500 miles, if the conditions are right, if we have enough speed, we can actually play in time together with no perceivable latency.
So once Dan learned about Jack Trip, he had to test it for himself with his friend Jorge Roeder, who was quarantined a couple miles away.
Neither one of us had improvised with another human being in over 6 weeks. And remember, we're professional jazz musicians. We're used to doing this like all the time. And so we were like in withdrawal, and I don't think we fully realized how much in withdrawal we were. And man, we started improvising together, and it was just like tears were coming out of our eyes practically. When we stopped, it was just like, oh my God, that feels so good. I've missed this so much.
After Dan's own success with Jack Trip, it was off to the races. He started teaching other musicians about it to build a network of people who can play together while they're still in quarantine. So with all of these musicians playing in sync over the internet, will we be in the new age of virtual concerts?
Will it actually replace live performance? I hope not, because it's totally next level. When you're in the same space together and you can talk afterwards and you can see the expressions on people's faces and you have that palpable feeling of if everything's going right, of everyone breathing together at the end of a phrase, that's just amazing. And I think if there's one thing that music is for, is to bring us together, and live performance in the same physical space does that more than anything else.
So playing online isn't quite the same as being in the same room. But for now, while concerts continue to be postponed and musicians are keeping a distance from one another, technologies like this might have to do.
Now let's see what happens when musicians try to use Zoom. In this example, the Ragazzi Continuo uses Zoom to sing a piece. At first it sounds okay, but as the piece progresses, you can hear the effect latency has on their performance. The Continuo then uses Jack Tripp's Virtual Studio to perform together online, and the results are impressive. A second, more sophisticated solution is the LOLA system, which is a low latency, high quality audio-visual system designed for musical performances. Unfortunately, it's not intended for amateur musicians, as it requires very specific hardware to reduce latency and a 1 gigabyte ClearPath data connection between sites to help reduce spikes caused by network traffic. Let's look at a couple videos for a better understanding of this system. The first one provides a good overview of LOLA. The second video is the demo between London and Edinburgh that is mentioned in the overview. We'll watch the first 2 minutes of that video so you get a sense of how powerful this system is.
LOLA stands for low latency, anything under about 35 to 40 milliseconds one way. LOLA allows musicians at distance locations to play simultaneously in real time.
We were amazed that musicians could actually play between Edinburgh and London. I don't think we expected it to work. We've now done projects across as far as Chicago and as far as Boston there.
So alongside this equipment, you need a reliable high-speed network, and this is where the Janet network comes in. Janet prides itself on being a robust, high-quality network, which works really effectively with high performance, high-end applications such as LOLA.
In terms of live performance, LOLA's going to allow people to do things that haven't been possible until now.
It removes really the geographical barriers.
It's amazing, you almost forget that they're miles and miles away.
And at JISC we actually have a couple of computers that are actually freely available to any institution in the UK that wishes to try LOLA.
It's mind-blowing what it's going to do to the potential for collaboration and the knock-on effect in carbon footprint as well. I think we're now just, what do we try next? What can we use this for? Does it have applications beyond music?
LOLA technology has been around for years now, and I think it's important to note that although it's not new, it's the application, the creativity behind it that innovates that technology.
It's good to see you.
Hi Sean, great to see you too.
Say hello to the audience.
Hello audience, hello London.
I can't say how excited I am to do this. This is once in a lifetime, or I'm hoping we'll be able to do this again in the future, very soon. I'm actually playing with somebody 300 miles away.
4.
Is it 400 miles?
400 miles.
That is amazing. This is normally done through tricks with 2-second, 3-second lag and faked, but this is the first time this is actually real. I didn't actually believe it when I was told, and I was told to pick some repertoire for this performance. Now, I needed to test and see if it would actually work. to do something like that, I needed to pick a difficult piece. Sua, I'm so sorry.
There was a lot of cursing going on at the first rehearsal.
I apologize. The first piece we'll be playing is Handel Halvorsen Passacaglia for violin and cello. It's a lot of fun, and I can definitely say it tests the system to its limits, so I hope you enjoy.
I'm just going to add a little thing. Your music's blocking your violin slightly. If you turn it slightly, yes, perfect. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Can you see me?
I can now, yes.
The overview mentions the Janet network, which is a high-speed network in the UK designed by JISC for research and educational purposes. Both videos are in my blog. If you'd like to see more of the demo, feel free to check my blog out. The options that I covered here and the others in my blog have been around for quite some time, long before the global pandemic. And as expected, they have seen an uptick in usage since the pandemic started, as musicians have tried to find ways to interact and collaborate while following their local social distancing guidelines. Okay, we've reached the part of my presentation that I've been looking forward to sharing with you, Electric Coffeehouse. I wanted to set the stage, pun intended, by talking about what got us to this point, a global pandemic that has shut everything down, including musical performances of all kind, and what musicians have done to keep playing. Electric Coffeehouse is a show put on by the music department and its students at East Rochester High School, and it's completely driven by the students with guidance from Mark Gauman, the school's Director of Instrumental Music Education. Let's learn about the story behind Electric Coffeehouse. So while I tell you the story behind Electric Coffeehouse, I want to share some clips with you so you get a feel for what this show is like. It's really unlike any other performance that the school puts on. Electric Coffeehouse was originally known as Acoustic Coffeehouse. It predates Mark's time at East Rochester and was started by the librarian, Brian Regan, who wanted to give the students the experience of going to a coffee house to hear music, poetry, comedy, and anything else that might occur in an open mic environment. The acoustic shows were held in the library and were very popular, and they drew in students who were not involved in the traditional music program. A few years into the acoustic shows, the students wanted to plug in and go electric. As with the acoustic shows, the students learned the songs, learned their parts, got up on stage, and performed with all the trappings of a rock concert, including lights, lasers, and smoke. Since the show falls at the end of the school year, there isn't a lot of time to pull it together. The kids typically have about a month to pick songs, put the ensembles together, learn their parts, and then perform. Mark provides the structure, fills in the missing pieces by finding other musicians as needed, and then guides the overall rehearsals and execution of the show. But it truly is a show about the kids, by the kids, and for the kids. With everything that was lost during the second half of the 2020 school year, Mark felt it was important to try to make Coffeehouse a reality. The kids did too. They knew it would be a much different experience, but those who wanted to participate put in the work and put the show together. I'll stop now so you can enjoy the rest of the video. Taking Electric Coffeehouse from a physical stage to a virtual one required a new workflow. Let's take a look to see how this was pulled off. First, the performers recorded their parts and uploaded their best takes to a shared folder in Google Drive. Mark then downloaded these recordings from Google Drive and used the following tools to process the recordings. Audacity, an audio recording and editing program, was used to capture audio from the videos and reduce background noise. In Pro Tools, a digital audio recording and editing program, Mark applied compression, EQ, reverb, and other effects to balance out the audio. In Vegas, a video editing program, Mark then aligned the audio and video waveforms to make sure everything looked and sounded in sync. Then, with the cooperation of the Monroe County BOCES IT team, the final production was streamed from the school's website to the audience who watched from the comfort of their homes. Let's take a closer look now at how the videos for these songs came together. We'll look at how Barracuda by Heart was produced. This was a song that my daughter chose to sing, and I planned on playing guitar. I had also learned the bass part just in case, but wasn't expected to play on it. As it turned out, the bass player who was supposed to play wasn't able to, so Mark asked me to step in. So how were these videos made for Electric Coffeehouse 2020? What did each performer need to do? How easy or hard was it to do this? Let's take a look behind the scenes and learn a little more. We all used the same track that had a count-in at the beginning to synchronize the timing. It was then up to each of us on how to record. Some used an audio interface device to get a good audio recording, and they then provided separate video recordings where the audio wasn't used. As you can see, I needed several takes to get a good recording. And I didn't have an audio interface, so I could only provide videos. We each had our own process to produce the recordings. I used multiple takes and sent in what I thought was the best. I also needed someone to record me. On the other hand, Mark had a camera on a stand, recorded in one take, and then edited his recordings to the best version. I have to say, I got pretty good at starting the song, putting the phone in my pocket, and then playing on cue. Mark then mixed the audio recordings, aligned the video and audio wave files, and then tiled the performers so it looked like a cohesive, synchronized performance. That's pretty cool. I hope you enjoyed this behind-the-scenes look at Electric Coffeehouse 2020. There were many challenges each of us faced to make these videos. We needed quiet environments, which meant no interference from street noise, fans, air conditioning, or other people. That was hard for me. The best room that I had to record in faced a very busy street, and I had to close all the doors and windows and turn off the fans in the window AC unit, which made the room very warm. Remember, we were doing this in July. My guitars also needed some work, but all of the local music and guitar shops were closed since they were considered as non-essential businesses. As mentioned in the video, at the time, I didn't own an audio interface device, so I couldn't provide the best recordings possible. I own one now. Overall, the general feeling about Electric Coffeehouse was good. Those who I knew who watched it said they thought it was a great show. I was nervous, waiting for the show to air. Unlike past shows I've performed in, I had no idea what to expect. I only knew what my recordings sounded like. I wouldn't see the final product until it aired when everyone else saw it. And I was very pleased when I did eventually see it. Mark said for him that Electric Coffeehouse 2020 was a unique challenge and a good learning experience. It's given him plenty of ideas of how to approach performances for the current school year. He was pleased to hear the positive feedback from all of the participants, that they were glad to have been involved and to help make the show go on. For Mark, though, his favorite takeaway was a personal one. For several years, he has wanted to have the alumni involved, and the 2020 show gave him that opportunity since physical locations were no longer an issue. He reached out to a handful of alumni who were extremely gifted musicians, but also ones who made it clear to him years ago that Electric Coffeehouse was a pivotal experience for them. This allowed Mark to reconnect with the alumni, catch up on where life has taken them, and once again, make music. Rob, Max, and Alyssa have all had success in the music industry since graduating from ER. Aubrey, who is now a nurse, was assigned to a COVID floor at the hospital where she works. When we were recording Electric Coffeehouse, Aubrey had recently recovered from having COVID herself. Mark said that being able to talk, laugh, and collaborate with the alumni was a truly special experience he will always remember. Electric Coffeehouse 2020 also opened other doors. Mark tries to bring in world-class musicians for his students to learn from in a workshop format. but with the pandemic, this was not possible. However, with the magic of the internet, he was presented with the opportunity to hold online clinics. And now, one of his students takes lessons from Alexa Tarantino, a jazz saxophonist who was rated as one of the best in the world by several major jazz publications. As for me, the 2020 show was equally memorable. I learned a bit about the recording process and how hard it is. I've also learned a bit about home recording, and I'm looking forward to Electric Coffeehouse 2021 to apply those lessons. And most importantly, I still got to perform with my daughter, even if we did so apart. So what's next for music? From the top acts in the biggest venues to the bar bands in your favorite local watering hole. The music industry, large and small, is hopeful that shows will be able to return at some point in 2021 as we see our country slowly reopen. The music industry has taken a huge financial hit. However, the massive $900 billion COVID relief package that was passed in late 2020 included $15 billion specifically for cultural institutions such as music venues and independent movie theaters. This money came as a result of the Save Our Stages Act, which Senator Amy Klobuchar co-sponsored. This money will help retain and hire staff, retrofit venues to comply with social distancing guidelines, and help pay down the expenses that have been incurred while these venues were shuttered. Going to concerts will be a different experience as well. Dr. Anthony Fauci feels that at least 80% of the U.S. population must be fully vaccinated before concerts can safely return. As of this recording, less than 20% of the U.S. population has been fully vaccinated. Until then, drive-in concerts and virtual shows will continue to be the acceptable stopgap. But when venues can reopen and welcome fans in, the experience will be something similar to what we've grown accustomed to in stores and restaurants, meaning there will be designated entrances and exits, enforced one-way pass to things like bathrooms, the bars, and concession stands, plexiglass barriers, and a lot of hand sanitizer available everywhere. Live Nation will also utilize new technologies to get people into their venues and seated safely in a manner that complies with the social distancing guidelines that are in place. On the last slide, I said that virtual performances would be a stopgap. This is a bit misleading. Commercial uses of virtual reality and emerging technologies have been a big moneymaker. For example, Travis Scott earned $20 million for a 9-minute show that aired inside the Fortnite video game in 2020. Companies like Wave and Melody VR are using motion capture technology to track the expressions and motions of an artist into a digital likeness, or avatar, and then stream their performances to a virtual reality platform such as Oculus Rift. Virtual reality shows allow fans to attend the shows regardless of where they are in the world. They also allow fans to experience the show from vantage points that they couldn't experience if they were attending the shows in person, such as from the sound booth where the audio engineers are, or even on stage with their favorite acts, and even backstage. One Rick Studio in Los Angeles has created a social hologram app called Jadu, which allows fans to access 15-second performances by their artists, which they can then perform alongside on their smartphones, and then even upload these clips to social media platforms like TikTok. New and emerging technologies are making the concert-going experience more interesting and acceptable while we wait for the real thing to return. We made it to the end. Thank you very much for watching my presentation. I look forward to seeing you on conference day, where we can talk about this topic in more detail. I'd like to close with a quote from the interview I had with Mark Gauman. He talked about the mantra he shared with the music department as they planned for the current school year. The COVID-19 pandemic certainly presented us with adversity that we as a society have never experienced. It challenged how we socialized, how we learned, how we exercised, how we shopped, and even how we voted. It has ravaged our communities and continues to frustrate us as new variants appear. But we have persevered, and we have found ways to socialize, to learn, to exercise, to shop, and even to vote. And we did it by being creative. Electric Coffeehouse 2020 was a microcosm of this balance between adversity and creativity. Under Mark's leadership, a group of students, faculty members, alumni, and parents pulled together to put on an inspired show. I wish I could share that show with you here, but it's way too long. However, I provided links to it in my blog, so please check it out. You won't be disappointed. So, in closing, stay safe and be well, and I'll see you at Spectrum 2021. Thank you.